Great. So just to introduce, so basically, Simon is one of our old amazing TPDs who recently left, only I think under a year ago now. So many of you may know him, some of you may not, but he is one of our general paediatricians at King's. And I believe, Simon, do correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you're also the clinical director there as well of child health. I don't know if you've moved on to something bigger and better or if you're still in that position. But as someone who has worked in a variety of different teams and is also, if you know him, as one of the most gentle and calm, but also diplomatic people, there's probably no one better to talk to us about conflict resolution in teams. So a big hand for Simon.
Well, thank you very much. What a lovely welcome. It looks like I've got a prop behind me, doesn't it, with the ladder? I'm just trying to get the lighting right, but it's not actually a prop, but I'll see if I can introduce it into the talk later. I'm in the study at the moment, which is we're kind of decorating, so it's all a bit of a mess. Certainly not as nice as Lucy's room, where she was showing off her lovely room that she had.
I can't see you. I can only see your icon. I don't know if that's the same for everyone else. Maybe it's just me.
Can anybody else see me? I can see myself.
I can see you.
Yeah.
We can see you, Simon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably just me.
Fine. So I've got some slides and I'll put them up in a bit with a bit of context. So yeah, I'm still CD for Child Health at King's for my sins. I'm also the Royal College Officer for Recruitment, so involved in all the recruitment process. And as you say, I've had some experience in dealing with this, but I don't think you're looking at the kind of wise heads around the table, which is probably me and Jonathan, and sort of vaguely put myself into that group. We may have done quite a lot of this, but I don't think either of us would regard ourselves as experts. I'm sure you'd agree with that, Jonathan, that this is challenging. And so I've got some slides, and I've got 7 slides, and I'm certainly not going to be a long slide show. It really would help if it could be as interactive as possible, because otherwise it is incredibly boring, and I appreciate Teams is challenging to have it interactive. So just put your hand up, or I may go around and just pick on people I know. And since I definitely know Steph and Nisha, I can see lots of people get picked on, so that's good. So let me see if I can sort out this these slides. It's always a challenge, isn't it?
Simon, it's quite interesting. Quite a few people can't actually see you. I can see you beautifully. It's obvious because you're only like a few hundred yards away.
Yeah.
But by the time you get down to Croydon, it's not working. Epsom and Epping seems to be a very poor place for internet work as well.
I'm not sure if I've joined with my RCPCH. Should I log out and log back in with my NHS? I can try that.
I don't know. It doesn't make sense though, because I can see you. I don't know why I can see you and no one else can. But how many people stick your hand up if you can see Simon? Okay, it's about a third of people can see you. I suspect probably is a good idea actually if you log out and try and log back in again, because you're looking good this morning. You've clearly put a shirt on for the session. It looks like you had a haircut as well.
Well, just using the trimmers. There was no point paying for it. Okay, I'll be back in a second.
Okay, cool. And just while Simon's offline, I'm not having any of this stuff that he and I are wise. I think there's an immense amount of wisdom around here actually, and wisdom is kind of it's something. It's not really. It's more experience. I think is I think the only thing you really gain as you get older. And wise people. There's a lot of wise people on this call, and you may not know it yet. But you may not have as much experience, but there's a lot of wisdom there. And that's, I think, really what the mission of a days like this is about, is actually to learn how we can apply wisdom just to some situations, because you guys are really brave. You're taking on big challenges. You're trying to make things better for yourself and for your peers and for the future and for children. And being brave and wise in those things is something you really can be. So, be super encouraged in that regard. So Simon, we'll be back in a minute. I was just really impressed with Lucy's session. I hope you all enjoyed that. Oh, Simon is back. Well, I'll stop rabbiting on. And I can. Who can see Simon now? Stick your hand up.
Oh, cool. I've changed
Okay,
from
that's much better.
Changed from NHS to RCPCH. So obviously, something wrong with the NHS access. Right, I'll try and share my screen. So.
Oh, it's super quick as well, Simon. I was impressed by how fast you got in and out again. Oh, out and in. I'll turn the microphone off.
Here you go. So, so I hope everybody can hear me. So thumbs up, Jonathan, if you can hear me. Yeah, perfect. So I've deliberately gone for this slide to start off with, and hopefully by now your hands are sweating, and you're looking at this thinking, shit, this is not where I want to be. And we'll come back and have a chat with everybody in a bit. But I guess I just want to say this is probably how it feels when you get drawn into conflict, and probably not just at work, but even at home. In anything we do, conflict is uncomfortable, unless you have a sort of personality disorder and actually seem to like this type of set of behaviours. But most people find conflict very stressful. So I'll get rid of that slide because that's quite anxiety provoking. I guess what I'd like to talk about is conflict resolution is kind of an implication of failure. Almost like conflict is failure, and then resolving something means that surely failure has gone on beforehand. And if we really want to talk about culture in today's, in the NHS and how we want the NHS to be, I just wonder if we could come up with a better name for that, which would kind of help us to tackle it in a more humane way than just packaging it into something called conflict resolution. So if people can just shout out if they've got any better names for this than conflict resolution, which may help us to manage it.
Finding common ground.
Yeah, so very good. So so that kind of working with each other to kind of understand each other's position, and understanding why the other person feels the way they do, and then finding that common ground. Yeah. What else? Or do we want to leave it as conflict resolution? Are we happy that if we get to that position that that we're going to just package it into this thing called conflict, and then we're going to try to resolve it?
There's something around making common sense or finding common sense in a difficult situation. Yeah.
And I guess ideally, we don't want us to get into conflict in the first place. So we need to understand what it is that, what is it about the culture of the organisation or how things are set up within that particular department or between individuals that's enabling conflict to start. And if you think that every system is kind of perfectly designed to get the results it gets, if you're getting a lot of conflict within your system or your department, then probably that department is set up perfectly to cause conflict. So I don't know what the right name is, but I do think conflict resolution, if I was told I was going to be put into a conflict resolution thing myself because of something I'd done or my relationship with somebody, I'd probably feel like a bit of a failure. So as I said, I'm not an expert, and I'll stop the slideshow in a bit and we'll come back and talk about our own experiences of conflict and what worked for us. And at 1:30 this afternoon, I'm the case investigator on what's called an MHPS investigation, and I'm carrying out one of my investigations today. And we'll talk a bit through that because that's probably what is like the higher echelons of conflict resolution. It's really quite unpleasant if you're involved in that. And so leading on the case investigation has been quite a learning experience for me. And I'll talk through what happens there so that Maybe some of you have been through one of those before. So, okay, let me unshare my screen, because we'll come back to. So who here has had conflict? We've all had conflict at home. You've all had arguments with your friends, with your partners. And how do you resolve that?
I guess with family and people like that, you kind of, normally it starts with lots of shouting and then eventually you kind of sit down, apologize, talk through whatever the issue was when everyone is feeling a bit calmer and settled in how their initial emotions were.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Nisha, and I think that lot of shouting is actually incredibly healthy. You know, if we can, but the thing is, what we need to do when you're at work is to control that, and to have that in a controlled way where we encourage disagreement. So if you look at the most highly functioning teams, they're teams that actually understand that people do disagree with each other, that they will have different sets of opinions, and they will feel very emotionally attached, and and give high importance to their opinion. So we need to enable for these teams to have those conversations in a way, possibly behind closed doors, and enable them to get everything out, discuss it, and then come up with a common way forward. And if you look at the best teams, the best clinical teams that you've worked with, you can almost guarantee that they do that. Has anybody had an experience of working with a team that enabled difficult conversations and work like this? Something quite alien to us. And if you read the kind of books around highly functioning sort of teams in business and sport, so I'm reading a book at the moment about the All Blacks and about how they function as a very high performing team. They actively encourage conflict and disagreement, and then everyone comes up with an agreed path and moves forward. Everyone feels listened to, valued, and you're able to have those brave conversations in a safe place, which then the whole team then can move forward. Now, conflict, when it goes wrong, often at work, it can start about quite a small thing. It might start around you taking someone's milk from the fridge. It might start around you using someone's computer, or not freeing up their space, taking their outpatient room. All these type of things can cause conflict. And if people were brave enough to go and have those honest conversations right at the beginning and say, I'm really sorry, this is my normal room. I've been in here for the last 10 years. I appreciate that it's a really lovely room. But on Monday afternoons, it's mine normally. I accept that you want to have it as well. Maybe we can come up with a compromise and work a way forward. And then potentially you can avoid that building up into a conflict where one person, will then put in a formal grievance against the other person. Has anybody here been involved in a grievance at work where someone's written about them and has said not unpleasant things, but have expressed their opinions about that person? Yeah. Do you? So I've seen Nisha and Steph nodding. I just wonder, without any sort of detail, just wonder if you could just tell us how that felt and how it was dealt with.
So I can go first. Steph, if you're ready, go. Go.
I can tell you I was heartbroken, and I spent about a week crying most of the time. It was not handled particularly well, because I didn't get a lot of support about it. even though I knew what they were saying wasn't true. It didn't really help that I didn't get much support about it. And actually, even now, more than a year later, it still upsets me.
Yeah. And was
For
there
somebody to say those things about me and to think that of me, I just, yeah, it's not nice.
Was there a power imbalance in this as well, Steph? Was it a more senior person or someone of a similar kind of level?
It was a family.
Oh, family. Okay. So yeah, so that can be really really painful. And we've got a colleague at work at the moment where some feedback has come through from a family about how their behaviour was perceived, and this person's never had any issues with, you know, how they've come across before, and they found it really, really, really difficult. So yeah, so I can. How did you deal with it, Steph? Or how are you still dealing with it?
I went to a consultant from another trust who knew me very well and asked them to help me work through it.
And did that help?
It did. And then I also went back to some members of the team who were there with me during the consultation that was complained about, and got some proper feedback, because I thought I'd been very kind and very nice. And obviously what they were saying was the opposite, and it was just nice to have some reflections from other people who were objective about it rather than just what I was thinking.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, gosh, knowing you, Steph, I can't imagine you being anything else apart from kind and nice. So Nisha, again, without too much detail, sort of briefly tell us what happened and how it made you feel.
So mine is slightly different. The one that comes to mind is when we had our lockers as doctors taken away from us and our space for handover by the management team, followed up by an email which said doctors should be more frugal with what they bring into hospital. That was sent to every single doctor, which I was initially just frustrated, because this manager was someone we never met before, who'd never come to see us or even introduce themselves to us, but happily took away our space and our lockers, and to the point where no one had any place to put any of their belongings when they came in to do their 12-hour shifts. And it got to the point where we were being told off for putting our stuff everywhere. And it was just annoying, because there was lack of understanding or even an explanation as to why it had been done. The way in which I dealt with it obviously got frustrated initially, and then I went to speak to one of the consultants, who was our clinical director, and just said, I just want an explanation, because I don't understand it. And if I understood it, and if our team understood the reason for it, then maybe we'd be able to get on board. But right now it just feels like privileges have been taken away for no real reason. We didn't really get our explanation, but we did manage to get our lockers back, which was great. But we didn't get our space back. So I think it was just anger and frustration and lack of understanding. That's how we all felt.
Sounds to me like you dealt with it absolutely brilliantly. And if I was to kind of highlight the things that you've just demonstrated, is that you kind of removed the emotion from when you had that conversation with the consultant, and you in particularly highlighted how it made you felt. And you know, and I think that's really powerful. So that's a really professional way to deal with this situation. So I think you dealt with that that brilliantly. I think the trouble is a lot of people wouldn't be as brave as you were, and may have just then the junior doctor tiers may have carried on without lockers, and it could have created the kind of problem would have snowballed in terms of the effect on morale and all the other things. So actually, I think it sounds like you dealt with that absolutely brilliantly. Jonathan.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight actually something that came up in those two stories, is this kind of imbalance of perceived imbalance of intentions. because a lot of people get really frustrated if they've put themselves out, done their very best, put up with shitty situations, tried to be kind, and then what they get back is, at best, paper pushing, box ticking, unkindness, or in Steph's situation, actually something considerably worse. I mean, it'd be really interesting, Nisha, in your situation, to find out actually what that management person had been told to do and what his things are, because it might not have been quite as unkind as it came across, but the perception of that unkindness, it's hard to see it wasn't, but the perception of that unkindness is so different from your team's willingness to put themselves out, stay late, sort things out properly, work through other problems that the trust has failed to sort out. So it's that imbalance I find very difficult to work with, and it really destroys my own resilience and my own degree to find common ground.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. You're constantly ruminating about it. It's going around in your head, and it completely removes your ability to kind of go back to what we were talking about in the previous talk around mindfulness, because you can't, because you're just kind of, maybe anger is too strong, but you are but you're finding it very challenging. It does make you angry. So okay, so in terms of I will kind of briefly explain a situation that I'm helping out with in terms of this MHPS investigation. So allegedly, a more senior colleague said to a more junior colleague something which was a breach of the EDI agenda, and wasn't in keeping with the King's values or with the values of the NHS. And this is the way it was perceived and the way it landed. And again, there was a power imbalance. The person that said it was more senior than the person who received the comment. And so the more junior colleague who had been the victim of this EDI comment was brave enough to raise it and to actually take it to the medical director, and it has led to this MHPS investigation. I'll talk through what happens in terms of the process, and it's interesting, isn't it? I'm sure that I know Sue's been the clinical director and Jonathan's been CD, and there's other people been CD on here. The people that give us the most difficulty in terms of dealing with them once you get to these senior managerial positions are those people who don't appear to have any insight and who don't really understand the impact of what they're doing on other people. Because to them, they're existing in their own world, and they think they're doing the right thing. And that can be really, really challenging, because we have a responsibility to empower a culture within the organisation where everybody can reasonably expect to turn up at work and feel supported and feel valued in everything that they stand for and what they are. And that's our job as leaders, to enable that. So I'll go back to my slides, which again, I've only got about 3 left, so you'll be pleased to hear. So we've talked a bit about individual conflict, and I think the thing with individual conflict is kind of, you need to have that bravery to have that first conversation, and if you're if you do find that difficult, then I think it's really important that you speak it through with your peers, and then hopefully that bravery will come and you'll be able to express yourself and actually get it dealt with, especially if it's something which is at odds with the values or is a breach of any of one of your personal characteristics that need to be protected. Team kind of conflict again. So I think Nisha's really kind of, what she talked about was a little bit about team, maybe a little bit about group, and there'll be the perception, so you might get that one clinical team feels that they're not being given the same opportunities as another team. and that can be quite difficult. I think it's our job as clinical leaders to enable those teams to develop and to feel valued. It does come down to the individual leadership within them, and how good they are at galvanizing their teams. There are some truly exceptional teams, and we all work with them. And then there are some slightly more dysfunctional ones, and managing those is a challenge. I think if I was going to give my advice, it would be about celebrating the quick wins and kind of celebrating the team as much as you possibly can. John Moxham is one of my probably my role model in leadership. Slightly unpolitically correct. He talks about in terms of consultant appointments, if you appoint about 100 people, possibly 25 of them will be your true clinical leaders of the future. And then 72 of them will be fantastic colleagues to work with who will provide high quality care and help to develop the clinical service. And 2 or 3 of them should never have been appointed. And he says not to use HR processes because it's a waste of time and you just go grey and get angina, which I have some sympathy for. But I think maybe when he was coming through as being medical director, he could get away with that. I think today there would be an expectation that you did use HR processes, but they are. I would try to do everything you possibly can to avoid using HR if you can, meaning having those conversations, meeting with people, finding the common ground, working together, and then see if you can get people to move forward together with an agreed agenda. I guess group conflict would be something like, when we had the conflict around the doctors and the junior doctors going on strike, etc. Or you probably can think of other examples of that, but that was a political conflict, and that was really challenging. It's probably slightly outside of my ability to talk about, but we can come back and have a kind of team chat about any kind of advice we've got. I'd be interested to hear Sue and Jonathan's opinion. So, but going back to individual, think about what it is you're trying to achieve if you're managing the conflict. Try to use the most hands-off approach and try to find common ground, get them to work together, get them to understand each other's position, and to be able to move forward if you can. A really important person is this freedom to speak up guardian. So I've been contacted by my freedom to speak up guardian last week because one member of staff felt excluded by another member of staff. And so again, we're trying to handle that informally within the department, but semi-formally, so that the more senior person does properly reflect on it. They do need to understand the implications of how they made someone feel. And I think really important, people copy behaviours. People base themselves on what they see other people do. So if your organisation is an organisation that enables people with challenging behaviours to succeed, then lo and behold, the people that coming in through the junior ranks will copy them. And I think we all work within organisations where there are people who probably fit into this category, but I think it's our job to demonstrate that the way we expect people to behave these days is in a professional, valuing way that enables people to speak up if they're feeling they've got something to say, and really use the values of your department and hospital and everything you do when you're trying to manage conflict. So I'll come back and talk about MHPS in a bit, but I just wonder if we could pause and get some reflections from Sue and anybody else, because you'll have some interesting experiences where you've been through, Sue.
Hi, yeah, thanks, Simon. I'm sorry I was late. I missed the beginning of your talk. I've been doing START assessments this morning. And oh my goodness, all I can say is there's an amazing bunch of trainees who just kept going despite lurching from disaster to disaster. It was a kind of IT nightmare, but we've all survived, and the afternoon starts afresh. And I'm not doing this afternoon because I wanted to be here. Yes, conflict. I think, goodness me, I agree with you, first of all, completely about trying to keep it informal where you can, and really sitting down and talking with the individual, because that's the way, and actually trying to really get their insight, and again, role modeling is really, really important. One of the things that struck me immediately is with amalgamations of organizations which are going on all the time, you might, well, the experience that certainly we have in a sort of small organization which has been taken over by a big organization is that you can find individuals whose behavior are very challenging from another organization, who come in with all the rights to do whatever they want to because they're in a powerful position. And the point you made about power is so important. And I remember very early on when we were taken over, a certain individual was in a meeting with a group of us, and two of us had to almost physically keep all the men apart. But two women were keeping my male colleagues off this one new male colleague who'd come in with, completely ridiculous ideas, and we were being the sort of, the mediators as always. But again, we always kept it informal, and we reached the point where that individual would come to me and say, "Can you give me feedback on my communication skills? How am I doing?" Which I thought was fantastic, actually. And people have commented on how very changed that individual is.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how, most of the time we don't face conflict, do we? Most of the time, as a bunch of people, as a bunch of doctors and nurses, we go into our professions because we're actually pretty good at people. And as you said, that large bunch of consultants who you start with, the vast majority are great colleagues. Some are great leaders, some aren't great leaders but are great colleagues, and generally we're very lucky.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And if you can work with people informally and help them to get them through that process, so that it works brilliantly. The challenge is when they don't find common ground. Nisha.
So I just wanted to ask the question, like Sue, Simon, Jonathan, do you think we don't experience much conflict because people aren't brave enough to come forward to express what they have experienced? And then going on from that, how do you empower trainees or anyone in your team to be brave, to come and speak up about these things that they may have experienced?
Oh, interesting questions, aren't they, Simon? Can I have a go first?
Absolutely.
Give you a bit of time, because you are really enjoying what you've got to say. I think, first of all, paediatricians are actually very bad at conflict. We try and avoid conflict much more than other specialties. My memories go back to my time as DME at St George's, where pretty much my first major task was trying to sort out training in the vascular surgery department. And of course, training was very much the tip of the iceberg. The problem was this sort of massive bit underneath the water, which was departmental behaviours. And as Bob was talking this morning about addressing issues with kindness early on and being very kind of violent about calling out unkind behaviours early on, and say, you just cannot behave like this, you're going to be disciplined for poor kindness, effectively. That was something that should have happened over many years beforehand in this department, which had developed a toxic culture. Those are not my words, but the words of the regulator. A toxic culture that prevented not only, forget about training, actually good clinical care. And what basically was going on, and you see this in some other departments, is it's almost like people are looking for areas to disagree about. and wanting to pick fights about stuff. I remember as a houseman working in King's on a surgical firm, which some of the players are still there, but they would actually in the radiology meeting deliberately find ways to belittle each other about each other's management. I mean, what an environment. They're deliberately trying to find stuff to trash each other about. Pediatricians are rubbish about this. We're very poor at this belittling behaviour, which is good, obviously. But actually, when we get into conflict, it's so surprising to us because actually that's not how PEDS runs. That actually we're not quite sure what to do. We take it very personally. We've heard accounts of that this morning. And our self-worth is very much threatened in that as well. So I think we have to be very constructive about it. First of all, we actually have to start with knowing actually that we are, effective people. We're grown-ups. We've got very good ideas. They're valid ideas. No one can take away your perspective, even if they say it's wrong. That's what your experience and your view is. And then we need to work out where we go from here. For me, I think the number one thing is to try and find common ground with anyone that I'm in conflict with. And I really don't believe that with two people who are both in the business of healthcare, that there is nowhere where there isn't going to be common ground. And that's your start place. And we spend a lot of time trying to find out what's different and where we disagree. But you'll see this in some meetings I run, which are very, very difficult meetings. But we'll always start with, okay, so where can we agree? What places can we take as a given, rather than focusing on what the differences are? And I found that a useful technique to actually spend, say, the first 3/4 of the time of my conflict meeting, actually saying, okay, so what can we agree? What is right about this? What are the principles? And then we spend the last bit of time talking about the bits that are difficult. That way, at least you get 3/4 of the meeting, actually get somewhere in it, and then you've got a really good backdrop from that to actually talk about the difficult bits. I don't know what your views are on that. You've probably got your own technique, Simon.
No, I agree with you. And often the nice thing is in those meetings when you do that strategy is the surprise on the people working together. They have agreed with each other. And they then kind of go away and start creating stuff together because they've realized that they can work together. So I think there is huge benefits to pulling people together and getting them to find common ground and working with each other. And when you see the penny drop, that actually we are in it together. We are in it for the same reason. We're just it can be quite magical, but it does require a lot of work and preparation to get there. Sue.
I think Nisha started off by saying, do we encourage people to speak up, or what is it? How can we get that to happen? And it's been very interesting for me in the last year in lockdown when we lost all of our paediatrics from Barnet. My goodness, did our trainees speak up? As Jonathan knows only too well. And we were doing everything we could to sort of try to be kind of nurturing and supportive and to listen and to shift people around in a way. But the interesting thing there is that once you get a couple of ringleaders, then suddenly you can find yourself almost in two sides. And it becomes very difficult actually, and certainly it's difficult. My strategy was I wasn't part really of the clinical department anymore, was just to listen to everybody and try very hard from the outside to support everybody, but they certainly had a voice, and maybe that was a good thing. As Nisha was saying, often people will be feeling things but not expressing them. Maybe that was a real opportunity for everybody just to say it like it was. And I think you'll find now things are very much better, maybe because of that.
But yeah, and going back to your point, Nisha, I completely agree. We do need to empower people to be able to speak up, especially when it's about EDI aspects or personal characteristics and how they've been made to feel in a work environment. That's unacceptable that they've been made to feel that way, and dealing with it is challenging, but that's irrelevant. It needs to be dealt with. and so that's our job. And has anybody here been involved in an MHPS investigation? I'm sure Sue and Jonathan have helped lead them before.
So, Simon, what is MHPS? We might know it by something else. I've not heard of this acronym before.
So it's maintaining high professional standards.
Oh, okay.
And it's a process where you have, so it feeds into the GMC. So weekly, the medical director will have a conversation with the GMC rep and the RO and the GMC rep and the medical director. We'll talk through all of the issues that they have within the organisation in terms of clinicians and how they're being handled. And if it's felt that a proper investigation needs to happen, that will be using the MHPS kind of framework, which basically involves a case manager. So the case manager in the case that I'm handling is a corporate medical director within the organisation who's done this many times. You have senior HR helping you out who kind of handle the process in terms of collecting all of the minutes from the meetings and the statements, etc. And then you have a case investigator, which in this situation is me. So I do all of the interviews and ask all of the questions of the people that were involved and write a report. And then I then feed that up to the case manager, who then feeds it into the GMC, and discussions occur at that stage. So the important thing, I think, for me is that, as with most people that get to this stage, they've got previous, shall we say?
Form.
Yeah, previous form, yeah. And you need to ignore that. And you need to try to not allow anything that's happened to occur to bias you. So that's challenging. I mean, it's easy when you don't know the person, which is in this situation. I don't know this person. It's not within child health. And so that is the MHPS process. And I think if you are involved in that, so I'm working with a trainee who I'm interviewing in 12 minutes. And the important thing is that they feel really supported, and so I'm meeting with the trainee, their educational supervisor, and we're going to, my main concern is that they feel supported, and we thank them for raising this concern, because it's so important. There are, if I go back to my boring slides, there is one resource which is, if you want to read through it, it will, it kind of links to. So this is, there's this resource here which is on Improvement NHS, and it's a Managing Conflict PDF, and it talks through the process that is there, and it highlights everything that we've talked about. Sort of nipping things in the bud early, the importance of brave conversations, empowering those, the importance of the culture of the organisation and the department in terms of enabling those conversations to happen and for people feeling protected and valued, using the freedom to speak up guardian whenever it's, this is a person you can go and speak to about anything. And they're invariably, lovely people who will put you at ease. And then how the process is managed going forward from there. But just to reiterate how Steph and Nisha felt when they were going through that process, it feels really, really, really crap. And you just need to make sure you're in a safe place. Surround yourself with people you trust, as Steph did. And as Nisha managed to do, and just realize that you're helping things out by moving them on, and it's part of us getting a better culture within the NHS. Questions? I think that's it then. That was my take on managing conflict. And as I said on my second slide, I'm not an expert. I don't think any of us are. And you learn every time.
Can I ask, today's a sort of day all around, particularly around developing the subgroups, the STC. I mean, is conflict a big thing within the subgroups, or is that not really kind of where subgroups have a particular problem? What conflict do we actually have within the School of Paediatrics? I'll try and be provocative and leave some space here. Can we stop recording, actually, Nisha?
Yeah, I'll stop recording now.
But I mean, I just kind of, Simon's stepped slightly outside. He remains an honorary TPD and friend of the school. So we'd be quite interested in his take on any particular kind of conflicts or issues that people had within the subgroups. So if you can't speak up, I'm not sure quite what we do. Maybe you speak to Simon separately if there is conflict. But are there any issues that people wanted to kind of raise at this stage, or generic areas where actually we run into conflict?
I don't think that we have like we said, we don't like the word conflict because it's quite aggressive, as Simon's first slide was in bright red capital letters, and it gives us a lot of anxiety. So I don't think anyone will speak up and say that we have conflict in our subgroups. I think we have differing opinions, which happens a lot, but that's human nature. But I don't know how many of us actually speak up about our differing opinions. I think we're very privileged in terms of we are quite a close-knit set of people. We're almost friends. And I know I would definitely be able to speak up to, say, Steph or Kate, if I can see right now, and tell them about my concerns or anxieties about certain things that have happened within the subgroups or within this trainee committee. But I don't know whether, again, and I come back to this, is whether we empower every single member of the TC who maybe have not been around for long to speak up. And I think actually a really interesting point, which Alex brought up in our subgroup lead meeting that we had, was about our, I think she's the first person to ever have mentioned it, but she was saying that we have, in terms of EDI, our ethnic minority backgrounds of who we have in the committee is actually quite minimal. And that was really empowering for her to have come up to say that. And I'm really glad that she did. But again, we are a very small knit group, and the subgroup leads are all friends in some way, shape or form. And we've known each other for ages, so we're comfortable having that conversation. But yeah, just some.
Yeah, we've got some other stuff coming through on the chat as well. I mean, I like Katie's point actually. Conflict when you don't know what you're doing. Actually, I mean, it's really annoying is when you've been spending quite a bit of time doing something, then you realise someone else has as well. And I'm not quite sure whether I'm cross with them or cross with myself or cross the situation wasn't going to properly managed. But you definitely feel a bit kind of peeved, especially if you put yourself out to do it now.
Yeah.
I think we sometimes do the conflict avoidance thing, like you were saying, Simon, too, a lot, to be honest. I'm trying to think in my time. So I've been around since like 2012, 2013. I can't think of any massive conflicts that have blown up at any point, but I can think of occasions where there's been small amounts of friction that probably, if we'd handled with conflict resolution more assertively, we would have avoided the kind of somebody taking credit for stuff and not doing very much work and kind of sitting in the background, or people kind of kind of leaching the good stuff without putting in the hard graft like that. And it's, to my knowledge, never particularly been really raised or addressed. It's just we've somehow worked out a conflict-free way to solve it, which is maybe always a positive thing. The one other thing I wanted to say as well is that I think sometimes trainees feel at conflict with the school. That one, I think, and then sometimes as a trainee committee or as part of the STC, somebody who understands the process or feels like they do, you feel like you're representative for the school. Sometimes you get flack for it too. They're like, my life's complex right now. I wanted to do X, Y, and Z with my placements or my life or my interdisciplinary transfer or my fast track or slow track or whatever, and it's not working for me. That's the kind of circumstance where I've mostly come across conflict.
Yeah.
That's really helpful, Kate. Actually, I completely agree with that, and I can see that from both sides as well. Having been a trainee who's tried to do pretty alternative training, and also actually when we work out there is kind of a limit to how much you can bend the training and actually still have a training program that still caters for 1,000 people. And that's actually a really difficult message to get across, and I appreciate that isn't always done.
Yeah. An example that we've just gone through at the college, I can probably talk about it without giving away too many details, but
go on, Simon, go on.
Some of the rules and regulations at the RCPCH are a bit bloody Victorian, and have not been dragged into the 21st century, and they're really having the light shone on them for being out of date at the moment, and they can make people kind of have to accept decisions without any kind of explanation. And surprise, surprise, trainees now, thankfully, seem to have the wherewithal and the kind of gumption to stand up to this Victorian mess. So we're having to look at these rules and regulations and bring them up into something which is more useful in the modern day. And this has particularly affected grid applications this year, which has been, I feel really sorry for the trainees. I think they've been subjected to a really out of date process. Sue.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about personal conflict. The only time of the year when I come, apart from the situation that I mentioned before, for me, personal contract to do with the school is when we come to doing ARCPs. Partly because I think it's just, those days which go on and on and on, and especially if you're chairing, seem to just be endless.